All right, we'll get started. You had a lot of reading material and a lot of information come at you last week. The content we have for tonight actually is a lot less. We're gonna pick up with spring management, what the bees doing in the spring. Talk about that a little bit, and then get into equipment. But before all that, we'll typically pull over and park at the beginning of every session to just answer questions. You guys have done some reading. You maybe had a question that came up last week. So is there anything you guys have questions about that we can kind of start conversation with before we get into what we have in PowerPoint? Lots of information we talked about. Yeah, go ahead.
So the chapter kind of briefly talked about feeders, and it had like talked about syrups and things like that. Obviously, syrups would freeze.
Right.
How are the bees getting their water in the winter?
Okay, I can start on it. So the question was, during the wintertime, where we are now, how are the bees getting their nutrition? How are they getting water? I can address it about what they're getting now compared to like warm months. Obviously, they're getting it from what's outside, right? From rain and from puddles coming in.
And the feeders, she was asking.
And the feeders, right? Feeder types. So let's start with what's going on right now. Right now, of course, as you point out, we can't give liquid now because liquid would freeze. Even sugar would freeze. Even if it didn't freeze, I probably wouldn't take it this cold. So any kind of feed that the bees are getting now that we've provided is going to be in the form of either granulated sugar, plain sugar. We will talk more about when we do winter prep class here in a few weeks. We'll talk about this process we call mountain camp, which is basically a way to provide granulated sugar not only as a feed source, but also as a desiccant, something to absorb moisture within the hive. You can also put on what we call a winter patty this time of year, which is a pollen patty with a higher carbohydrate content, sugar content. Nutritious for them, will help them get through winter if they aren't getting to their own honey stores or are running out of them. So that's all we can really do to supplement right now, this time of year.
There's fondant that you can get.
Fondant, thank you. My sugar turns into fondant basically. My sugar dries down.
It's mainly powdered sugar that they've added a little moisture and kneaded it like a dough,
Right.
and it's that sort of texture.
Yep. Good point. Good point. I don't use it. So I didn't think about that. As far as moisture in the hives, liquid for the bees. So because there's a difference in the temperature of that hive where the bees are keeping it warm and the temperature outside of it, that difference in temperature is going to produce condensation within the hive. That's a two-edged sword. Condensation, cold, ice cold water that drips on your bees is really bad for them. Terrible. But there is a presence of condensation in the hive, so if that hive, we'll talk about clustering again when we get into winter prep class, but right now those bees they're instead of being like a nice basketball-sized group of bees, they're tight together, keeping each other warm. When they can break that cluster, they can find resource within the hive, either move that cluster, reassemble a cluster near food, or go get moisture that's droplets that are inside the hive and use it. In nature, there's no liquid water out there unless you thaw, right? So it's the same plight for our bees that are in managed hives like this one that we'll talk about later today. So I don't know what their water need really is in the winter. I know there's a lot of creating that bee bread we talked about has a little bit of a water content to it. Not doing much of that in the winter. But just to drink, and Jason, I'll take your input on this. Is there a water need in the wintertime?
Typically the bees get enough moisture from the honey itself that it's in there, and if anything they're producing excess moisture through their metabolism that just then, like you were talking about, sticks to the top of the hive and condensates and either freezes there or drips back down.
Frost, So,
Usually moisture is a problem in the wintertime. You have too much of it as opposed to them needing to go out and get moisture to bring back into the hive. I've never heard of anybody needing to provide a waterer for their bees in the wintertime.
but while you're there, and because it'll touch a little bit when we get into equipment, let's talk about feeder types. Jason and I were just talking about feeder types. There's a type of feeder for, let's talk about liquid feed. When you're using a sugar water or sugar syrup. I have one, if I can, I have one in that bottom blue box. That's a tight box, and my frames are packed in there. But if I can get it out, I can at least tip it and show you what's in there. There's what we call a frame feeder. It's basically the similar shape to a frame. It's hollow. A one frame feeder holds about a gallon, and you can use, depending on the season, you can use sugar water to different mixes. Our spring mix is typically, well, I might get this backwards. I think our spring mix is typically 1-to-1. Yeah, 1-to-1. You can go thinner than that. 1-to-1 is easy to remember. Some of our beekeeping friends in the South will go a thinner mixture than that. It's because I think it prompts their queen to lay even more. Winter, whenever we're preparing for winter, we'll typically provide a thicker honey or sugar water solution, the 2-to-1 solution. That's enough that the bees can take it out of that container and store it, right? Put it away. Put it in their comb, hopefully in a place they can get to it when they need it.
Yeah, it's pretty close to already the proper moisture level at that point, so the bees just have to do a little work to prep it for wintertime. At that point, you're just emergency feeding to get them heavy enough to go into wintertime. So you're not trying to do anything other than, hey bees, take the stuff, stick it in the comb, dehydrate it down a few percent, and cap it over. So
there are other feeder types. There are bucket feeders where you can have a bucket that'll create a seal. You basically put a hole in what would be the lid, have your feed in there, whatever mix you want, and you invert that bucket on top of your hive. You have a place in the hive that's also open, like a little hole drilled with a plug in it normally. When the plug comes off, the bucket gets inverted and it'll pull a vacuum, and if you do it right, it'll just leave droplets at the underside of that, and the bees will come up and they'll feed off of that. Done incorrectly, you're going to drench your hive. It's not good. I've done something similar to a bucket feeder before, and it doesn't fit in the way I do things right now, so I don't do that. When we talk equipment, we'll talk other kind of feeders too, but outside of the in the hive feeder or your bucket type feeder, those are, I believe, the most popular. There are feeders you can put right on the entrance of the hive, but you're inviting other critters than your bees to come get that, which not only will they take your feed, but they can see that there's honey in here and they want that too. Those entrance feeders or boardman feeders, I don't recommend them. I don't think they're a good idea. They're convenient. I mean, you can put them right there, put a mason jar on them, but there's better ways. What other feeders am I missing? That's about it around here.
Top feeders.
True. Like a feeder that is same size, dimensions as the box itself, the hive itself, that is basically, it's like a plastic box that will sit on top of the hive, and the bees have a way to get to it, hopefully without drowning in it. And again, the thing I don't like about it is you have all that feed on top of your hive. If something goes wrong, gravity brings it down in. But it's easy, it's convenient, because you can open that up, fill it, put your lid back on, you're done. Really not even messing with your bees. For me to fill a frame feeder, I'm in there with my bees to do it. A top feeder, you can pretty much do those without, I mean, I would still garb up, but you're not going to mess with your bees a whole lot by doing that.
the disadvantage,
Bag feeder, yeah.
yeah, that's an emergency way.
Yeah.
The disadvantage to the top feeder is you get a little bit into summer and you want to do an inspection on your hive and it's not completely empty. It's a real pain to try to wedge a hive tool under there, pop it up, get it off your hive without then just spilling it all over the place, because it's a thin tray and any liquid in there has a tendency to slosh around. So it just makes it tougher to take it off with feed in it. Where a frame feeder, it doesn't matter. You can get inside the hive. You're not moving the frame feeder. You're just pulling some frames of bees out and looking at them and stuff. And even if you did have to take the box off with the frame feeder, you really can't spill that feed out of it unless you tip the box up at a hard angle. It's going to stay in the feeder. Where the top feeder, I guarantee you it's super easy to spill out of a top feeder. I've done it a million times myself.
Light bulb moment. I just realized why a lot of people who've been beekeeping longer than me and have a lot more hives than I do, they have a frame feeder and it's in their bottom box. So they're just going to tip that top, especially if they're on pallets.
Yeah,
They tip
just some people then, if you're not commercially doing this, a lot of times your frame feeder moves up then to your second story box instead of staying down in the bottom because you're like, oh, I don't really want to inspect my hive this time. I just want to get the cover off and fill it back up. So
I was thinking of Tyler, right? I see his videos and he's got another commercial, going commercial beekeeper. He's a commercial beekeeper. He'll have pallets of hives out there and he'll have a video. You'll find his videos on our Facebook page, I'm sure too. And you look down this row, he's got 4 or 5 pallets, which at 4 hives each on one side and 4 or 5 pallets at 4 hives each on the other. He's got all those boxes are up at a 90-degree angle and sitting on the box below them. That's how he does some of his inspections. Opens them all up and then gets to work. No matter what he's doing, checking for queen cells or feeding or mite counts, that's just how he does it. Now I know why. I know why he has his feeders down below. Because if he does that, that feed's coming out. Okay. What other questions can we talk about? We've got lots of time this class. It's not going to be nearly as packed, I don't think, as we had last time.
something I'd like to point out is if you haven't watched last week's video that I shot of this class, anytime we started describing something we didn't have the physical item for, I edited the video and actually have slides that pop in there and stuff. So if something tonight, like us talking about these feeders, you can be pretty much guaranteed that when I post the video of this class, I'll put slides in there that show the top feeder, that show the bucket feeder, that show the frame feeder, etc. if we don't tonight have that equipment sitting here.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
just for clarification, there will be images for you.
Yeah. All right. If there aren't any more questions, Jason and I will trade places. He's going to talk about what the bees are doing in spring. We'll touch on swarming a little bit and swarm management, which really all these things, keep this in mind, everything we talk about across these weeks, they all do connect together at some point. Swarm management equals factors into your honey production, which factors into maybe why you're keeping bees, which factors into what do I got to leave my bees for winter and what else do I have to do to get them ready for winter, which again gets us back around to where we are now. We're in winter. What are my plans for spring? Are my hives surviving or not? It all kind of connects. So,
All right, here.
right, so swap.
This first year, you won't have to worry about swarming too much, and you really shouldn't unless you happen to buy just one deep box. This here, if you just only bought one deep box as some sort of a very frugal purchase at like Fleet Farm or Tyson's, where they had the thing sitting there and said, that's all you need is this box. You will need 2 deeps, and you'll need maybe 1 or 2 honey supers for this first year. At the rate that they normally grow, you may not need the honey supers, because first year they're taking a 10-to-1 conversion to build wax. So for every 10 pounds of honey they bring in that they don't have a place to put that honey, they might build 1 pound of wax and fill out the combs and stuff. You just won't get into the honey supers your first year much at all. But anyhow, you won't have swarming issues this first year because they're building all that brand new comb, and you should have a second deep in whatever kit that you buy that you can give them. But year 2, when that pollen kicks in and your hive's coming out of wintertime and they already have all this comb here, well, that spring nectar flow hits, and the bees are just going to come in there and waylay the boxes that are sitting there. And if you don't right away in the springtime, say those dandelions are blooming and you get a few other things blooming there, if you don't come out there and give them that first honey super in that month of May going into June, pretty much the month of May, give them their honey supers, they could get tight on space. And when we were talking in last class, the thing that really triggers bees to swarm is them running out of space. So, what happens when they run out of space? Well, they start chasing the queen around the hive, making her skinnier. They start breeding out swarm cells, and then the hive goes ahead and leaves the colony there to start up a new one. They hatch out a new queen. The new queen goes ahead, gets mated, starts the process all over. Go ahead.
You said give them back their honey supers. Did you take away their honey supers during the winter?
Yes.
Is that why?
Yeah, for Iowa, and a lot of other states, I should say, not just Iowa, but like Minnesota, southern Canada, and stuff like that, they normally go into winter with 2 deep boxes. It's just a pretty ideal space. You get up mid-Canada, northern Canada, Alaska, stuff like that, they might send them into winter there with either 3 deeps or 2 deeps and just left a honey super on top just to get them through the additional month to month and a half of extra winter that they would have. But for Iowa, you send them into winter with 2 deep boxes. And this will be covered again when we get to our wintering chapter, which is at the end. But 2 deep boxes, approximately 80 pounds of honey in those, which would be the equivalent of 11 deep frames just full of honey. So if you had 15 frames in there, 8 of which were solid honey and the rest of the other 7 were partial frames of honey, and you thought you added them all up and it was 11, bingo bango, you're good for wintertime. But anyhow, and I probably didn't even do the math, I probably violated 20 there, but whatever.
That's all right.
You want about that for honey going into winter. If you don't have that, you do the feeding like we were talking about with the 2-to-1 sugar there.
If you don't have that going into winter, right? There comes a point in time in which they won't take liquid feed, and then you're down to maybe a solid, maybe a fondant or sugar. Yeah.
And you'll do emergency feeding like that typically in the January to February transition. And again, we'll cover this stuff all over again in the wintering chapter. But if you send them into winter with a honey super on top, it does a few things against you there. That's additional space that the bees have to maintain there. And additional space is inviting in pests like mice to get into the hive there and then just get up into that dead space that's not being protected. That additional space is harder for them to temperature regulate, though they can do it just fine. And probably the thing that people hate the most is you come into springtime and your bees are usually up there in that top box. Even if they didn't need the honey stores, a lot of times they chimney their way up there and they'll be in the center of that top box and the queen will already be laying brood there in the springtime, and it's hard to push them back down out of that. So it just does a few disservices to you to not take those honey supers off in the fall. Is there any other questions revolving around that? Did I cover it good?
Good. Yeah.
Now, when you say your deeps, do you put both your deeps out at the beginning, or do you just
No. At the you don't want to give them too much space because I just said the word chimney here a little bit ago. If you were to actually just set your entire hive out in your apiary, 2 deeps, 2 mediums, or 2 deeps, 5 mediums, whatever, out there and throw the bees into it, they'll build on 2 frames in that bottom box, 2 frames in the next box, 2 frames in the next box. They'll just want a chimney right up through the center of it.
Okay.
You give them 1 deep box, and there's a thing called the 7-10 rule. When they have built comb and are actively using 7 out of the 10 frames in a box, you can give them the next box. And they'll go ahead usually and fill out those remaining 3 frames, equivalent of 3 frames in the bottom box, as they chimney up into the next box there. And when they get that one 7 out of 10 built out, you can then throw honey super on there, and they do a beautiful job then of building the comb the way they should and filling out the hive. Also again, if you were to give them that entire hive and they start chimneying up through the center, that also is a lot of space for them to try to temperature regulate again, and you can chill brood and stuff like that if you have any cold snaps in the early spring there when they're starting to do their work. So it's just good to just give them 1 box.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay.
Alrighty.
So, swarming. In last class, I talked in detail about swarming. Tonight, I covered it briefly here. It's the natural process for reproduction. And your second year, when your hives come out of wintertime, is your most dangerous time for swarming. In the months late May going into June is when you're going to see a predominance of swarming there. You will have swarming issues that could possibly rear their head in July and even August. I sometimes get swarm calls. I hate them, but I can get a swarm call in like November even. And that there, it's just a wasted time trying to go collect a swarm in November, because what do? You have all these loose bees and you can throw them into a hive, but you can't physically in that month feed them enough to get them through wintertime. It just is waste. So swarm call in May and June, fantastic. That's just money in the bank because you're getting free bees and they're going to build up for you, and that's basically a free colony.
Right there.
July, it's not so great, but you can still get them through and stuff. August, you're basically almost out of luck there for trying to get that colony to survive, etc. So anyhow,
I'd like to ask the class, that word swarming kind of can have a negative connotation. So what do you guys, what comes to your mind when you hear, oh, these bees, they're swarming, or they're swarming at me? It kind of has like an aggressive connotation to it. It couldn't be further from the truth. Bees that are swarming, they're typically very full, that they've eaten well before they've left, or they've ingested a lot of honey, and they're protecting their queen. They're around her, but they're just looking for a new place to be. They have nothing to protect really except their queen. Not that anyone here would want to do it, but you can stick your hand into a swarm of bees if you're gentle doing it, and they're probably just going to, for the most part, ignore you. They're not defending anything. They're typically not aggressive at all. And catching one of these, or more than one of those, is like my favorite thing to do. It's like for me the best part of beekeeping.
yeah, it's one of the most docile stages that you'll ever encounter the honeybees, because they're not at their colony. They have no brood to defend. They have no honey stores to defend. They're just this huge mass hanging off of a branch somewhere looking for a new home, and all of them have full bellies at this point when they left the colony. They fill themselves up with the extra carbohydrates to kind of prep themselves for wax production, because wherever they move into, they're going to have to immediately start turning around and pumping out wax, so that they have some comb for A, the queen to lay in, and B, for them to immediately go out and start bringing in food stores to build back their colony. So right now, they are the happiest they're ever going to be.
They're moving.
He was mentioning you can go up and touch the colony. I've gone up and posed for photos where I went ahead and just stuck my face up against the colony, and I'm like, taking a photograph of it, a selfie, because they're that docile to them.
Not sure how this will turn out on my camera here, but we have a swarm in progress. One of my colonies has decided that it's too cramped on space, and the queen has left, and a ton of the workers are following her. They haven't yet really decided on any one spot in this area to land and fall up. They might actually be now starting to form in here. They are. Excellent. Well, once everything was said and done, we probably have 4.5, 5 pounds of bees here. This is just an 8-frame box, so scale-wise, that's why I'm coming up with that. If this was a 10-frame box and you were looking at that same mass, you probably think it was more than that. I've gone ahead and put a swarm lure in there. I I sure didn't have to. I could have tried just shaking them, but they just formed up. And I've had it before when a mass just forms up and I tried shaking it out of a tree that the queen was flighty enough at that point in time that basically as soon as I closed up the box, the mass tried taking back off again. So for now, I'm trying to go ahead and let the bees just basically are taken to that swarm lure, and they're all just sucking down into the box right now, all on their own. But I was going to leave this alone for a while and come back here and check it out. But most of the bees have moved down into the box. As you can see, the branch is nowhere near as covered. And instead, the front half of the hive, as well as the entrance down below, is caked in bees from that swarm lure. I'm just wondering if right in the middle of that, where all those branches intersect, if the queen's not hanging out in there still, because they haven't just all pretty much abandoned that spot and come down.
And breathe right on, because bees don't like carbon dioxide. It's one of the things that stresses them out, ticks them off, because they know immediately that an animal is putting its face in their colony. So if you ever have that frame of bees up there that you're inspecting, and you do that sigh of relief because you found the queen or something's looking good, and don't be surprised if you just have a whole bunch of bees fly right at your face when you do that, because you should always be conscious of your breath going on your frame of bees.
So if you see those hanging around your bee yard, because if you guys are going to get bees, you're going to kind of become a vector. Yeah, call me, or call Jason.
Yeah. Call Ted over here.
Call us.
He'll take care of it.
I will actually help you. I carry about 4 of those little green boxes. That's a nuke, by the way, what I call a nuke. I built that myself. I don't leave home without 3 or 4 of those in my truck from April through, honestly, August. Because you never know when someone's going to say, hey, there's some bees here. Do you want to help me? And whether I help you and they're your bees or no one wants them, I'll take them. I'll find a place for them. But that's about as close as it gets to money growing on trees as you get in beekeeping. So, and just the whole process is catching a swarm. It really is fun.
So in the book it talked about I have 2 questions. One is, what is the amount of time you have once they swarm to get them somewhere else? And the second,
It varies,
okay.
and I'll get into the details.
The second thing was it also said they have already chosen sometimes a spot where they're going to go. So what
Not at the stage of leaving the hive, but when they're like this, there is a stage there. So first part is, how long do you have to collect that swarm? Usually they fly out of the hive and they'll pick one spot and stay there. I have had the misfortune of they picked one spot and I was getting all my equipment to collect them, and then they moved another 30 feet up in a tree to another spot there. I don't know why they did that, but they did. But anyhow, you typically, when they move out of there, you have most of a day to collect that first swarm, I would say. Sometimes it gets into day 2 and you can collect it. A lot of times they should have chosen a home by the time day 2 is getting towards the end of it. Day 3, they really haven't found a home, and a lot of times they've started building wax on that limb and stuff, and a lot of times they won't even move if they have to stay there day 3 and into day 4. So let's say they swarm on day 1, and then it decides to rain on them that day, and there's rain in the forecast for the next 2-3 days. They may be just SOL at that point, and they will stay there on the limb because they've been using the carbs in their bellies were getting depleted. They already started building comb, and they're already starting to do their thing. So once they start building comb and have decided to take up residence, they a lot of times don't leave. However, they usually try to find a home in the first 24 to 48 hours. So your hive immediately swarms. You've got a window of opportunity there. You don't have to rush. If you just walk out into your apiary and you see a swarm and you don't know how long it's been there, yeah, hurry your butt back up to the house, grab whatever equipment you can, and expedite this as fast as you can. Somebody calls you up on the phone and they don't know how long that swarm's been there. Again, it's a rush situation. you may only have an hour to catch the swarm before they decide to leave. Every moment that swarm sits on a branch, they're sending out scout bees to try to find a space that's appropriate for them. 3 to 5 gallons in size is really tempting for them. And if they find a soffit of a home, an old farmhouse that doesn't have insulation in the walls, they absolutely love those. They find a tree that has a nice hollow in it. A log laying somewhere that also is hollowed out. They'll move into any of these structures like that. People with compost bins in their yard that don't actively even use their compost bins and they're sitting out there anymore for decoration. Every so often somebody will call me and be like, well, I don't know how long it's been here, but I need this hive removed from my compost bin. I get there and it's fully filled up and I'm like, you haven't touched your compost bin in like 3 months, have you? And they're like, no. And the colony's been there that long. So anyhow, they're looking for a space like this. And those scout bees come back and they're all excited. And they start doing a waggle dance to basically tell the other bees where this is at. And there's studies on this, and depending on how appropriate the space is, how awesome it is, the bee will be very virulent with its waggle dance, and it will get other bees to copy the waggle dance, and more scout bees will go out to that location there, and they'll also come back, and they're trying to basically do an election, and they're telling all the good things about their candidate. Other scout bees will have found other locations, but they're only like halfway interested, and they're hearing all the good things about this other location, and sooner or later they give up on their dances and they join up with this here and agreeing with it. And it's kind of if you ever want to read the study on it, it's called Honeybee Democracy. Mm-hmm. And it's basically because the colony, as a democracy, is deciding to vote on the most popular location to go. And the colony will just, at that point, chase off the queen again, and then everybody is in a giant storm of bees there as it moves across the sky there and goes to the new location. Fuzzy teddy bears flying all around you and a giant hum all around you. And suddenly all of it just trails off and leaves you behind there. And you can literally walk after the swarm there. It'll outpace you and stuff at some point there, because honeybees can fly a lot faster than you can walk or run or anything, but you can try to trail them, and if you're lucky, they only go 5-6 blocks away to a new home, and you can go ahead and extract them out of that. If the home they found is 2 miles away, you're never going to keep up with them, and you'll lose them at some point.
It's like being in a honeybee tornado.
Yeah.
It's really pretty cool. Let me get back to where we were. So we had these 2 pictures, good swarm pictures, and then we went from there to this.
So, I don't think it's covered later, but capturing a swarm?
Sure, yeah. Let's do that.
So if there's ever, go back to the swarm picture there, one of them, doesn't matter. That one's a little harder to get, but it's not that tough. If you have a nuke box, or if you buy a nuke in one of those corrugated plastic boxes, they're easy nukes,
JZBZ, or
Jester,
that's
Jester
right.
Easy Nukes.
That's right.
I actually advise getting the Jester Easy Nukes. They're so lightweight that you can actually just carry them up on a ladder there and set them up on the top of your ladder, and it's easy to hold on to that while you're doing other stuff. A wooden nuke like this, it's a little heavier to try to handle and a little more cumbersome if you're up on a ladder trying to collect a swarm and stuff there. But you would essentially, if you can do it, put this underneath your swarm, and you take the top off there, and you might even remove a couple of frames out of there so that there's some space for the bees to fall into. And you grab onto the branch there and just bend it over so it's right over the top of this. And find some open spot on the branch there that the bees aren't on, and you just do a real quick whip of your hand into the branch there. And it jars the bees enough that entire mass should fall down into your nuke box there. You would think that the bees are just going to immediately all fly up into the air and fly off, but I'd say a good 80% of them actually fall down and they just want to walk up onto the surfaces there. And they're most concerned with staying with the queen that's in there. She's not a very good flyer, even though they skinnied her down and stuff there. So she should walk up onto the frames in there. A lot of times it's good to just leave these frames out, and while you have 80% of the colony in there, just put the lid back on but have the front door open. And just stand back for a while. The bees are going to start fanning the pheromone scents from the queen, the Nasinoff scent there. It's a homing signal scent that they'll do by just lifting up their tail ends there and pushing the scent out the front door of the hive there. And any of that 20% of the bees that are just fluttering around, they're going to hone in on it, and you're going to get most of the colony in there, especially if you just leave it alone for like an hour. All the bees should go in there, and you'll just have a few little foragers coming back and forth and stuff, and at that point you could close up the nuke and take it home. If you don't have the luxury of having a nuke box with you, you can just go ahead and get a cardboard box. And you can knock that whole pile of bees in there, close it up, and try to get it home there with you. You may have more difficulty with a cardboard box. You may have more bees flying out of the box in your car ride home and stuff. They could overheat in the box, which will cause a lot more to get out. But in a pinch situation, you can just knock them into a cardboard box. If you get into another case scenario, sometimes they may have been on that limb for 2-3 days and you see some wax built up on the limb there. If you see some wax built up on it, I'd actually say clip the limb off and just put it in the box with them. There's a lot of scent attractant on that wax there, and even after you wait for like an hour, you may have a partial cluster sitting on that wax up there and 70% of the hive down in here, and no matter how many times you knock them off that branch, they keep wanting to go back to that scent. So if you're at somebody else's location, just clip the branch off and take it with you, and you can get all the bees then. Yeah.
The minimum percentage of the colony that you need, of the swarm that you need to have a successful colony. You were saying like in August you have too many and you can't feed them all winter, or like in November rather.
Well, I was saying later in the summertime, you're taking this swarm, and even if you have in your shed or something a whole bunch of drawn comb, it's hard to give that swarm to just empty frames of no food source and then tell them, hey, I want you to, in a time of the year that there's hardly any nectar sources, to bring in 80 pounds of honey and be ready for wintertime. So a late season swarm is bad in those regards, unless you've got a freezer full of frames of honey that you can just give them at that point.
What if you only took half the swarm, is what I'm saying, the queen and half the swarm?
If it's early spring and stuff, you could take just, honestly, you could almost get away with a grapefruit-sized cluster of bees there in the queen and give them into a hive, a nuke, whatever you have there. And if you were feeding them a bunch there in the spring, because I'm saying a grapefruit size, you could probably get that grapefruit size in May going into June to go ahead and build you a pretty good colony if you kept giving them feed. If you didn't give them feed, you're going to miss that big part of the nectar flow, and you're going to have problems with them that small of a cluster doing much for you the rest of the summertime there. So that would be my advice on it. So
I hope
did
that,
cover all the
yeah,
the
that's
swarm part?
pretty good. We can talk about catching swarms again a little later in class. It's for me, it's some of the best part of beekeeping. I hope each of you guys have the chance to experience a swarm, that bee tornado, and catching one. It's rewarding. It's pretty cool to do. Everything else really is very opinionated after that. What do you do with a swarm once you have it, right? But we can talk about that later. So I think let's talk about superseder.
Okay, the difference between superseder and swarm cells?
Yeah, probably.
All right. All right. These are terms here. Superseder cell is something that the bees do when the queen is failing them. For one reason or another, maybe you pulled a frame out, and she happened to be right there on the frame or the next frame over, and as you're pulling the frame out, all bees are sitting on this side of the frame and sitting on this side. And there's plenty of space for a bee to pass each other like this. But there's not enough space for them to pass them like this, back to back. So if you pull that frame out and you haven't shifted it over a little bit to give them some room, you're doing something called rolling bees. And that's when the frame that you're pulling out here is passing by a bee on the other frame here, and it hits its body into it, and it kind of squishes them together and rolls them onto between the two bees there. Well, if you had a queen on one of those two frames and you roll her and it damages her, the colony's going to go ahead and supersede her because her scent changes to that of a wounded sick bee. And the bees do 80 some percent of their communication is all through scent actually in the hive. So when that queen scent changes, they know immediately, and they're like, all right, let's start doing some superseder cells. Let's get rid of our queen. So that's if she all of a sudden is damaged that way. She can also be running out of reproductive material because she's getting older in life. Disease can also affect her and stuff there. But anyhow, at some point, the queen starts not becoming okay, and the colony wants to get rid of her. So they're going to supersede her. They will build superseder cells basically anywhere all over the frames. Swarm cells are a little bit different. That's when the colony is getting too packed on space, and they've got all the time in the world to basically decide they're going to swarm and breed out a queen. So oftentimes, instead of the cells being all over the middle of the frames, in the emergency situation of supersedure, they'll put swarm cells down around the bottom edges of your cell, or your frame. Swarm cells are different in that I said that they have all the time in the world, so they're building it there. A lot of times the queen will be laying eggs on the outside of that frame, and they just follow behind her and they pick some nice ones and start forming cups out there.
Yeah. The difference is the bees have, if you've damaged the queen or if the queen's become a problem, they have limited time to replace her because they may only have the eggs that she has already laid to work with. Whereas if this hive is on its way to swarming, the queen is still in good shape. She's still laying eggs every day, a lot of them, so they can pick where they put the cells, how they treat them, and treat them as if those were going to be potential queens from the day the egg lays, as opposed to, oh, our queen just got smashed. Okay, we have some eggs here that we've been treating as workers so far, but now let's start now feeding them to be queens. That there might be a difference in nutrition and queen quality at that point.
If you're in the springtime and you see swarm cells, know that your bees are already telling you that they're cramped on space. So.
And changing their mind, well, again, that's opinionated. You may or may not be able to change their mind. You can squish queen cells, but I don't know if that's going to stop them or not.
It's debatable.
Yeah, it is.
You can take the chance, cut out all of those swarm cells that you see, give the bees extra space, and pray that they stay like that. I'd say a third of the time when you do that, they go ahead and swarm anyhow, and then you've just made your hive queenless at that point. You may have cut those cells out, 2 days later they swarm, and they're now trying to breed a queen and they're behind the 8 ball. Instead of a queen hatching out within a day of that swarm taking off, you've started the process all over again, and it takes 16 days for them to breed out a new queen there. So you've just set them back at that point 14 days, because I had said 2 days later they swarmed on you or whatever. So 14 days delay. And hopefully they've got good larvae still in there to do that. A lot of times once they start chasing that queen around the hive for swarming process, she also stops laying during that time. So you may already not have any larvae of the appropriate age for them to turn into queens. And by cutting out your swarm cells, you've made the hive hopelessly queenless at that point. And we'll get into some of this stuff in a little more detail. How you fix that is you have to buy a queen, basically, if you're hopelessly queenless. Or trade a frame out of another hive if you have a second hive.
So I'll use me as an example. I'm, for the most part, usually looking to grow my hive count. I've got equipment I've purchased that I'm hoping to take my hive count from where it is now to a number that I have equipment for by the time I enter next winter. So if I'm inspecting a hive and I see that, and I also see a good queen, if I think it's a good queen, or if I'm inspecting a hive and I see multiple queen cells across multiple frames, I have a choice to make. Right? I can take advantage of that and leave that hive leave them some queen cells. Don't take them all. But if I wanted to expand, that's an opportunity if we're early enough in the year that I can take those, put them into a nuke box like that, a frame that's got 2 or 3 cells on it, an appropriate number of bees that go with it, put it in a nuke like that, and for me, I take it somewhere else. I take it to a different location completely. And now I have 2 hives, but I'll watch the one I did that from, the mother hive, to make sure that they succeed in, if they're going to swarm, they swarm. I'll try to catch them, but to make sure they leave behind a good queen, so that hive is the term we use called queen right, that it remains queen right, and it's going to take me a month of babysitting that hive to make sure that. And I'll do the same for the one that I just took cells and bees and took them somewhere else. But if they both succeed, I've got 2 hives in a place where I had 1, and that's how I grow. Yep.
I do a little different than Ted. I don't move my hives anywhere. If I've got frames that I've got cells on that I'm going to split out and stuff there, I'll basically just, if this is my hive right here, I'll take all those cells out, and whatever's left behind that has the queen, I like to just move it a few feet over facing a different direction. And whether I make 3 nukes or 5 nukes or whatever, I like to have them facing the general direction that the bees would have been coming back to their hive. Most of your foragers are going to come back to right where the original hive is at. The benefit to that is they have a queen over here on this other colony. These guys, they're going to be trying to make queens out of those cells. I want to get extra workforce to come in there, take care of them, build me wax, recoup the colony and stuff like that. So I'm taking advantage of the extra worker bees that are coming back. I've never had problems with it. I know some people are like, oh, all the bees will smell their old queen and go over to the old hive, and that never happens to me. And a lot of the commercial guys out there, if they're got a bee yard there where they're requeening hives, making splits, doing anything out there, I don't know any of those guys that are worried about taking all their splits 5 or more miles away. They just split in the same yard and they keep going, and they don't have problems.
I do think I have a bit of superstition baked into what I do, but it works for me. So that's why I continue to do it. The point there is whenever you take these basics that we teach and find what works for you, do what works for you. Don't just do what we do, but do it for your reasons.
So if you do that and you turn your one hive with the queen in it, do you have to block it off so they don't come in? Because I've read where they say you cover it if you do that, because then the other ones takes like 3 days for them to reorientate themselves or something to the new.
No, I don't bother blocking off the queen right hive there at all. The main thing is people say that your foragers can smell the queen, and that's why you should either move the nukes 5 miles away so that the bees that are in them are just completely lost, don't know where they're at, and they stay with the nukes. Or they'll say that returning bees, the bees in the nukes and the returning bees, that they can smell the queen and they prefer that. Well, the combs smell like the queen. That still smells like their home and stuff. And if I in the middle of the day pick up a pallet of bees with my forklift and set it in another part of the yard, I will go out there and I'll see 4 clusters of bees just swarming around where the old pallet was at, because my pallet has 4 hives on it. So you'll have a swarm here, and a swarm here, and a swarm here, and a swarm here. And it's all the foragers coming back, and they're like, where's our hive? And they'll even ball up on the ground there, just determined that their hive is supposed to be there. And they won't know that their hive is 10 feet away. At some point, those guys do split off, and they move into other colonies. I think it's more drifting, because I can go check the original hives that were on that pallet, and their populations have dropped. You know, they don't suddenly fix themselves. And any of the close by hives just seem to be boiling over with bees at that point. So I'm pretty sure that they just moved to the hives that were closest to them and stuff at that point.
That's entertaining to see someone move the door, right? You can actually move like a nuke box. Right? I'll slide those around. I'll move it like this far, and those bees will come right here, like it was right here. Even though it's really close, it was right here, it's right here. Eventually they'll get there, they'll figure it out. I think in my head that's what they do anyway. But they're locked in on a location, and if you change the location, they're confused.
So are bees of different colonies pretty tolerant of each other? I think like ants, they'll kill any ant that's from a different colony.
They're fairly tolerant in most situations. If a bee shows up at a colony and it's been foraging at all, it's just allowed in the front door. It doesn't matter if it's from 3 miles away or 5 inches away from another colony. They're just like, oh, you're bringing food, come on in here. In the fall time, when you get into robbing situations, for some reason, I swear it's like the bee shows up at the doorstep, doesn't have any food in its belly, and it announces, I'm here to rob you. And of course, then all the guard bees come out there and defend the hive, and they're fighting off the bee. But they've done studies on this. If the bee shows up and it's just lost and it's there to deliver honey, they're like, oh, come on in. You're welcome.
Yeah. One, and again, we'll hit it in another class, but if you have 2 hives side by side, one is really doing well, one is struggling, maybe its population is too low, and in the middle of the day, you reverse those, your foraging population is going to come back to the place they left from, not the hive, because you've moved the hives, the place, and that's a way to boost up a hive that was low on population for some reason, something happened, and kind of balance those out in a really easy way. I take advantage of that whenever I can.
So we've been talking about swarming a whole bunch, and I think we missed something here. The easiest way to prevent swarming is just to inspect your hive every so often, and when you get to that 7-10 level, give it another box, give it another box. If you've already got drawn comb from past years and you don't care about the 7-10 rule, just make sure that you come out there and you're always giving them enough room that they can put the honey stores up there and aren't backfilling into the brood nest. Because when they run out of room to put the honey, they'll start putting it, I know it's not going to make sense for the video, I'm over here, but they'll start putting it down here, and the queen wants both of these boxes for laying. And once she gets pushed out of this box and gets down here, they should get to a packed stage, and they'll sooner or later swarm on you. Yeah. Swarming in your own apiary is caused because you didn't monitor bees enough and give them enough space. If you give them enough space, they shouldn't swarm on you. They shouldn't swarm on you. Sometimes springtime is pretty just exciting for the bees, and they may try to build some cells and want to do it, but most of the time you can head it off just by keeping ahead of them.
You keep adding on, how high can you go? Or can you remove some of the honey supers that are
I mean, hypothetically, if you had an unlimited nectar source, you could have, sometimes you'll see old black and white photos where you see a colony that has 15 honey supers on it. That was probably taken in Florida where they have 11 nectar seasons. Mm-hmm. But here in Iowa, you might get as high as 4 honey supers on there, maybe even 5 if you're in a fantastic area. But at some point, you get far enough into summer that basically when you hit August, most stuff in Iowa does not produce nectar at that point. You get a little bit of goldenrod nectar, but most varieties of goldenrod produce a lot of pollen and not much nectar, and nothing else is really blooming around here. I have one bee yard that's near Lake Aquabi, where you keep bees too, and that yard actually does excellent in August, but there's some special marsh type flowering plants in that specific area that I benefit from. Otherwise, all of my other yards across Iowa just shut down in August. You shouldn't get much more than that.
You always just have one or two deep, you never do more deeps.
I mean, you can also use deeps as honey supers. The bees don't care what size the boxes are. I'm just saying the queen is going to want 2 boxes there for her. Your perfect situation for wintering is 2 boxes here in Iowa with 80 pounds of honey. And typically people use those for their brood box. You can use 3 mediums. That's the exact same volume of space, and the queen will lay in there. She doesn't care. You could use shallows. She's still going to lay in at about the same cubic space for her doing the 1,500 eggs a day, and the bees will use that just for the brood nest.
There was a second part to the previous question. As far as stacking supers on, you can say you're having a great year and you've got 3 supers on there, and there's still nectar flow to come, and you're out of boxes. You can remove a super, shake the bees out of it, make sure your queen isn't there. Be careful. Extract those frames of honey, and then put those back into the frames back in the box. Put that back on the hive, and they'll reuse it. It's work. It's extracting honey is sticky hot work. But can you do that if you're low on equipment? I'm kind of operating that way now. I don't have enough supers for the hives I have, so I extract my honey all throughout the year. I may not even take a full box of honey. I may pick a frame or 2 that's done, put in a frame or 2 that's either brand new or drawn, extract those frames, and then I have them ready to put back into another hive, so that I can make the most of my equipment and not have to buy new equipment just to keep the bees from running out of space.
You say the queen will go up to the top of the honey supers?
If you don't barrier her from doing it, she will. Yeah.
That would be...
I did not bring queen excluder. That's one thing I didn't bring.
If the bees are using it for honey, she's not going to go up there into the honey area. I was talking about her going up there if you just gave them raw equipment and they would chimney up there and stuff. You also run into, if you had the 3 box situation there, the 2 deeps and the medium on there over winter, and then you came into springtime, they would already be eating the honey out of that medium up top there, and she would already be laying up there in that situation. Yeah. The bees like to move vertically when they're going to eat their honey stores, and then as they fill back honey, they get pushed down for the laying area. But once you get once you have the 2 deep boxes of all comb for the queen to lay in there, she won't really want to go up into your honey supers. You can give her a plain box there, and they should immediately be building wax on it there and backfilling with honey as they're building the wax there and stuff in that space.
Jason's answers are great, but keep in mind this is a box full of girls. You can't really tell them what to do. I mean, they're going to do what they want to do.
Yeah, you could have 10 hives and just one of them, for some reason, the queen's like, oh, well, I don't even want to use the sides of this, the 2 deeps down here. Yeah. And they'll fill in honey on those, and she'll move chimney up into that medium there. Predominantly, she'll stay down in the 2 deeps there. They do sell something called a queen excluder, but you'll also hear some beekeepers call it as a honey excluder, because when you put the queen excluder on there, sometimes your colony just doesn't want to walk up through the excluder and touch those boxes up there. If you already have drawn comb, they're more prompt to move through a queen excluder, but if you put a brand new box with brand new frames on top of a queen excluder, sometimes they will just ignore the heck out of it and stay down below.
Yeah. There's a lot of opinion around excluders. A lot, and they're a handy tool to have. Their purpose is not only to try to keep the queen out of the supers. That there's other ways to use them too. You can use them when you're making splits. Again, we'll talk more about that later. It's a tool to have, I think, but yeah, Jason's right. It's hard to pull bees through an excluder onto brand new. And I'll show you what brand new frames look like here in the second half of the class. They're not motivated to use that unless they have to anyway. And to go through an excluder to get there, they just sometimes won't. They just won't do it.
What do we got coming up here?
We talked about our Waggle dance. And this, I think, gets us here.
So we're going to talk for a little bit the rest of the class, and I can probably get all this into about a half an hour, so we can go longer if you like. We're going to talk about equipment, from the hive itself, to tools, to safety equipment. It'll say this on the next slide. There are things that you are going to need. You do not need everything. I have a couple catalogs here you can thumb through, and really good suppliers. Man Lake, Dadent, Hilco. They will sell you a better bee. They will sell you whatever you want to buy. But just getting started, you don't need to have every utility they have. You don't need everything. What you need to get started, aside from the bees, is, like we mentioned, probably 2 deep setup. Really good idea to have at least 1 super. 2 would be better, just in case your bees take off and degrade that first year. The bottom board, top, will go through all the pieces here as I kind of pick the hive apart. But you need basic things, you need basic safety equipment, and maybe a tool or 2 to help you navigate the hive. There are lots and lots of other things, like anything else. Think of it like a mechanic. You can have a tool for every last little job in the world, or you can kind of make do or make your own tools in some situations. So on the slide there are just the basics of the hive component. That's typically what you're going to buy when you buy a hive kit from a vendor, or Jason sells hive kits as well. But you're basically going to have, we'll go from the top to the bottom. You're going to have an outer cover, which is what this guy is here. By the way, an outer cover, you can go with this. It's got the nice metal top. It's really shiny. It does get hot in the summer, by the way. Mine's all dirty. Your equipment will look like this after a year or 2. But this is really usually made out of pretty solid material. And its job is to just shield you from the rain and have enough weight to it that it's not going to blow off. This thing telescopes over the hive, so you have a little bit of play here. It's typically not just going to blow off, typically not. Under it, you're going to have what is called an inner cover. Again, yours will look like this eventually too. The main purpose for the inner cover is so that the bees don't glue down your outer cover. Your bees are going to create a substance called propolis, which is like a bee glue. That's how they seal their hive. That's how they keep it healthy inside. That's how they keep it together. That's how they keep intruders out. And they're gonna stick this thing down, which is why, and I don't know if I have it handy, you will need a hive tool. And I have misplaced mine here. Thank you. Oh, I do have one actually right here. Thank you. These also come in various shapes and sizes, but it's going to have a flat, typically sharp when you get it end. You're gonna wedge this in here. There are some things you do before you open your bees, right? We'll get into the actual practice of managing your hive in a bit, but you're gonna have to crack this open typically if your bees are strong at all, so you can get to the rest of your hive. So inner cover, again, it's just another layer. Its job is so you don't have to try to pry this beast off that is telescoped over. Right? That's hard to pry that off if it gets stuck down. I have put one of these on without an inner cover before, and the bees glued it down. By the time I got the lid off, the bees, they didn't want me around. They were done with me already. I didn't get a whole lot done. So supers was framed. Let's go over some. So this, we call this a super, a honey super. Does anybody know why we call it a super? It's a funny term. It's because it goes on top. It's the only reason. It's above everything else. It's not great. It doesn't fly. It's not super box. It's just because it is above the main living area for the bees. This is storage area. And this is what, as beekeepers, we hope they fill this up with honey so that we can steal it and eat it. That's why it's here.
Yeah, sometimes your first year, you're going to hate the terminology of the boxes. Because, you've got the deeps, you've got mediums, and you've got shallows. Well, somebody's going to all of a sudden be referring to them as brood boxes and supers. And that's function over form. Form is deep, medium, and shallows. And function is brood boxes or honey supers. That's the difference between. You can have a deep as your honey super. You can have a medium as your brood box. It's just how are the bees using it and how do you want to pull your honey and stuff is just how the terminology is broken out.
Why wouldn't we just run all the same size boxes, these big ones? Why wouldn't we want to do just all big boxes?
Better have big muscles.
Because I'm old, and these get heavy. A deep full of honey, I mean, debatable how heavy it is. It's got to be close to 8 pounds. It might be heavier. That's a lot. And if it's like, you got 3 of them, it's you know, well, okay, bottom board, first box, second box, third box, out here, fourth box, fifth box, if you're lucky. That's a lot to lift when you're starting here. I mean, it's a lot of weight. I know some beekeepers do everything in mediums. It works for them. They have the resources to do it. Everything is lighter for them. The downside is the price for this piece of equipment and the price for this piece of equipment is the same for the most part.
Very close.
Very close. So my price per hive goes up by a third, plus the box itself, for every hive I have that I run all in mediums. The good size is, none of them are very heavy. You know, I can manage it. I now have, I'm running like this, 2 deeps and then supers, and when I'm old, I will probably wish I had all mediums, older.
I'm kind of going the other way. I'm like getting tired of, you know, going out to a bee yard and wanting to do splits or wanting to do this and that. I've got all these tons of mediums of drawn comb in my barn, and I'm just like, I should just do more deeps and more deeps and more deeps. And I don't mind extracting deeps of honey. Yes, I hate picking them up, but once they're in the extractor, they all spin out the same way.
Jason's not old yet.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
All right. So
You asked Tyler Holton, I'm ancient.
Yeah. So supers with frames. Let's park over and look at this for a minute. So, well, you guys can pass this around if you like. So this is what the bees will do to a frame. The queen's not been in here. There's no. I'll show you a frame that has the markings that the queen's laid in here. But that is that honey in it. I didn't mark it's a super frame. Anywhere from 1 year to I'm a 7-year-old beekeeper. Between 1 and 6 years, that's had honey in it. I've taken care of the comb. I treat it well. I extract it. I try my best to keep pests out of it. That is super valuable. If you want a honey crop, you have to have that. If you make your bees make those while the honey flow is going on, their effort is going to be in making wax as opposed to filling it with honey. So that is treasure right there we're passing around.
So I read you can get like 10 frame versus 8 frames.
Yes.
And an 8 frame is maybe preferable for the people who can't lift real heavy.
Also very true. The stuff that goes inside is all the same. It's just less of it. And your box dimensions are here as opposed to out here. But the equipment's interchangeable. What goes inside it's interchangeable. You can't. I mean, wintering in Iowa and 8 frame equipment, you can sure do it. Absolutely. But if you have an 8 frame box, that means you're going to have an 8 frame bottom board. You're going to have an 8 frame lid. If you use queen excluders, you're going to need an 8 frame queen excluder. So everything that has to do with the length and width of the box would have to change for you. Yeah, it can be done.
Where are you at on this, taking that 10 frame and spacing it out to 9 frames and enlarging the distance between the frames to allow the larger cells for easier uncapping?
Let's both answer, but can I go first? Because I'm a hobbyist here. I'm still a hobbyist. In my brood area, in my deep boxes, I stay with 10 frames, with the exception of this guy down here has a feeder in it. That's what this is. So I have 9 frames in the feeder. By the way, that feeder makes this box really tight. I would have to work to get that out of there. Oh, so sorry. Let me show this so the camera can see it. Let me set that down. I have a feeder in here, so for the camera, I can see it. That's a frame feeder, there we go. And that's only, from my place in the world right now, that's the only place where I use 9 frames in a deep. I prefer to have 10. I can tell you this for sure, if you do this to a deep box and leave it square on here, but you have that much space, the bees are going to make use of that space. and it's not gonna be in a good way. They're gonna put comb there, they're gonna lay in that, they're gonna, I mean, it's gonna impede your ability to conveniently manage that hive. Now, you can take these 9 frames and space them evenly and make that work in a 10 frame box. You can, and they'll draw that comb out a little fatter, right? They'll draw that comb out past the frame a bit, and you can do it. I just don't do it in my bee boxes. I'm gonna guess that for commercial guys, that's 1/10 fewer frames they have to buy to do that with. Or maybe that gives them some other type of advantage I don't know about. Now in my supers, I do that. I have 9 frames. Actually, I had 10 frames in the super because I'm storing it for winter. But typically I have 9 frames up here. But I'm going to space, I'm going to try to space them and move this. But it'll have just, honestly, without gloves, the width of my thumb is just about the right spacing. Put them in here something like this. This will be close enough anyway to where there's that kind of spacing. Show it for the camera. About like that. And in my experience, I can get more honey out of a box, a super, has 1 less physical frame in it than if I have 10 in there packed. This only works for me if my frames are already drawn. If I do that with frames that are not drawn, they're brand new frames that only have the foundation on them, like this, those bees they're still going to abuse that space between the frames and make comb in a way that is not going to be helpful. So that's my take. I do 9 frames if I have drawn comb in my supers. If I have drawn frames, I'll do 9. I've done 8. The 8 didn't work out very well for me. I know other people that do, but I do 9. If I have brand new frames and a brand new, I'm going to pack them together. I'll have a little space on each side. I'm going to pack those frames together like that and hope they draw it out evenly. Because if they do, and I wind up with a box full of frames like this, my job just got easier when it comes time to inspecting this hive, when it comes time to extracting the honey from this hive, from this box. It's great if my frames are in good shape. 9 frame, 10 frame, what do you say?
Well, the biggest thing here is going to be, you guys, for your first year, don't even fathom doing 9 frames anywhere in your hive, okay? Like Ted mentioned there later on, if you already have drawn comb, you can do that. If you don't have drawn comb and you try to give them that 9 frame situation in the honey supers, instead of building you beautiful frames, they will jump that comb back and forth between the frames, or they'll try to build free standing comb between the frames. They'll just make a mess of things because you're violating bee space if you give them blank frames and the extra additional space of that 9 frame situation. Year number 2, when you have drawn comb that's already there, you can leave one of the frames out and give that little space between there. They actually have a little tool you can buy that will just automatically space all your frames perfect for the 9 frame situation. What that does is it does allow them to put a little extra honey in there. They'll build the frames off, or build the comb off of those frames that are pre-existing there a little fatter, which makes it super easy for you to slice the cappings off with a knife, or run it through a machine that takes your cappings off. It makes that almost perfect so you're not going and trying to work out little corners and stuff like that. But it allows more pounds of honey to also be deposited on those frames. I don't know mathematically why, but magically a 9 frame box gets you a few more pounds of honey than a 10 frame box does, just with those fatter frames. And again, it's so easy to cut the cappings off when they build it out from the frames. So 9 frame is great from there. Going for the commercial guy, never, ever, ever, ever do 9 frames in any of your brood box. There's no sense to that at all. Okay. Don't even bother with that. That's silly talk. If somebody says they have 9 frames in one of their deep boxes, they'd better have squeezed a frame feeder in there for where that 10th frame is supposed to be and just packed it in there. You may only have 8 frames if you're running a 2-gallon feeder in your hive instead of a 1-gallon feeder, because Usually you have to pop 2 out to fit them in there and stuff. But you would never, for any reason, give them extra space down there in your brood boxes. You don't want to give them the chance of building burr comb and ugly stuff.
I've even seen, we hit a couple terms. Bee space, so you guys, has that term come up in your book already, that bee space term? And I'm gonna get the measurement wrong, is it 3/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch?
3/8 or a quarter.
So it's the amount of space.
I thought it was a quarter of an inch.
I always imagined it as about the size of an eraser on a pencil, is kind of what I always imagined it as. If you provide them with, if you violate bee spaces and things are too close to each other, like they can't make use of the space because there's not a space there, they're probably gonna glue it together or just ignore it. But if you give them too much space, they may decide to use that to build comb. And to do, you know, again, they're gonna, especially if they get tight on space in the box, they're gonna build comb where they can build comb. And, or maybe propolize it together. That part of your goal in beekeeping, especially as new, is you want beekeeping to be a pleasant, fun experience and have a good experience with your bees. If they've done things that make it hard for you to do your inspection, which makes you try harder or spend more time in there than they want you there, it kind of goes downhill at that point. So I think that's about it on frames. The next thing on there is a queen excluder. I didn't bring one, but all a queen excluder is a device that's flat that would go right on top of your top brood box, right? And it would go right over top of this. It's not a screen, but it's built so that the worker bees are small enough they can pass through it, but your queens and your drones cannot. They're too big. The idea is to keep your queen down here, let your worker bees come up through, so that they can fill this thing out. We've said it once, but I'll do a quick repeat. If you've got drawn comb up here and you decide to do a queen excluder, do it, but you need to check to make sure that your bees are making it up here and doing some work. If you have brand new frames, which you guys, most of you will, if you have brand new frames and you aren't in a position to put your honey super on to maybe get them at least to draw those frames out, I wouldn't have an excluder on there. I think your bees are going to be less likely to go up into brand new frames with nothing on them to do any work. You can always put your excluder in later if you wanted to. Make sure your queens blow it if you do that. Right, shake the bees out of it down into here. You can put on later if you want to. But the purpose is to keep your queen down here where you want your laying to occur and out of here. If your queen gets up here and lays in your honey super, it's not the worst thing in the world. You just have a little more work to do to separate what you can harvest from what you can't harvest.
And a lot of times, by the time you get to harvest time, a nectar flow will have pushed the queen out of the honey super. But if you're just using a hot knife or other rudimentary tools, 'cause some people their first year, they don't have the fancy equipment and stuff, and they're trying to make do. But when the queen lays in your honey super and the bees go ahead and pupate out of that, it leaves more of a cocoon substance in the walls of it that's harder for your knife or your hot knife to pass through and take the cappings off. So it can make your job more difficult when honey harvest time does come up if you're using comb that has had brood in it in the past. It won't do a nice clean cut for you. Now, if you're using fancier stuff, if you go to an extraction party and somebody has a chain uncapper or one of those queen line silver uncappers, that's the machines with the oscillating knives and stuff on it, no problem. It goes right through that, because for commercial operations, they're used to sometimes queens getting up there and then being forced out by the nectar flow, and their machinery is set up to handle it. So
The dark area there, that's where the queen has gotten in there and laid eggs, got on both sides. In this case, it looks like on this frame, I let those young hatch out and then repurpose the frame back for honey production. Because there's no, I mean, it doesn't look like I cut through that. That looks like I just let them hatch out, and then whenever I had a chance to put that back into honey super or store it for the winter like I am now, that's what I did. This is perfectly suitable for storing honey that I'm going to eat myself or sell. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's normal, actually.
Nope. Once the kids hatch out of that, if the bees have too much nectar coming in the front door, they just go in there and clean the cell out like they would any cell and go ahead and put honey in there. It's just the walls of the cell are a little tougher to cut through when you're just taking like a bread knife or your heated hot knife and trying to cut the cappings off.
I can't say as I've ever had any problem with it though. Serrated bread knife, hot knife, either one still cuts right through it. Maybe a little less pretty, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hive bodies, talk about the hive bodies. So we talked, this is a super, this is also a medium. It's super because it's up here, it's a medium because of its size. This is a deep, it's a brood box because of its location, it's a deep because of its size. These frames are all built, we mentioned bee space, actually I'll touch on it here. These frames are all built, boxes and end frames are built so that the space between the bottom of this frame and the top of the frame above it satisfies that bee space. There's not much more, it's enough for them to walk around. Hopefully not enough for them to abuse. Now, before I knew what I was doing, or got close to knowing what I was doing, I would build my own boxes. I'm a terrible carpenter. For me, being off a 1/4 of an inch, a 5/8 of an inch, oh, that's close enough. So some of my boxes were too tall. And so my space here wasn't this, it was more than that, and they will put comb in between there. Again, it's not the worst thing in the world, it's manageable, but whenever I go to get into this box, I've got some cleanup to do most of the time. And I spend enough time getting down this far into the box that I've already, I've already used up part of the time that this bee's gonna tolerate, this hive's gonna tolerate me being around. So,
They'll always build a little bit of burr comb,
Little
but
bit.
if you violate,
Stuck it
if you
together.
give them too much space, they're just going to glue the heck out of it all over the place. It's going to be ugly as can be.
right. Okay, I didn't bring an entrance reducer with me, but this is your entrance right here. This is where the bees are gonna fly in and out. A reducer is, it's nothing special. It's just a piece of wood or other material that's gonna take this space and reduce it, change its size, shrink it. The reasons for a reducer, there are lots of them. We'll probably talk more about that when we get into the management part of beekeeping. But for example, for wintertime, I reduce my entrances in the wintertime to about that much, mostly to keep mice out. And then what's left here, I put screen over. There are other reasons, right? If we're in robbing season, reducing your entrance is less space for your bees to have to guard. Talk more about that later, but an entrance reducer is a piece of wood, typically, or maybe a piece of metal that goes over there. Bottom board here, this needs to be solid. You're going to have a lot of weight accumulate on this place. So I built a few out of 3/4 inch ply is what I built them. Yeah, 3/4 inch ply. So I built mine out of. I still prefer to buy those honestly now. I can make them, but I want it to be good, square, and solid, not warp. So that's kind of the bottom. The very, very bottom part here, it looks like a ramp, is a hive stand. I don't use those, but there's a purpose for them. So let's talk about the stand itself. You can have a piece of wood that's under all of this that acts as like a landing ramp for your bees or as a hive stand, but this is wood, and if you have this wood that, even though it's painted, if it's directly on the ground, wood is going to absorb moisture. Moisture is going to do things you don't want it to do to wood, and it's going to damage your equipment. Most beekeepers are going to have the important part, the expensive part of their equipment here off the ground in one way or another. On cinder blocks, on horizontal that they have multiple hives on, something like a table, but not a table, something they put together. I'm starting to toy with going on to pallets, which, again, my equipment's on a pallet, but that pallet's treated wood, it's right on the ground. I have a back problem, so I don't know how this pallet thing's going to work out for me, because it's a lot of bending over or closer to the ground. Most of my hives, I've designed up to this point to work to where my working space is right about here. That's where the top of my top deep is. And the way I manage bees, I'll have usually no more than 3 supers, and that's a rare time for me. You don't have enough supers to put 3 supers on a hive. I'm usually working 2 supers or only 1. but I'm never really working up here. I'm working right here because that's where my health allows me to work. But the hive stand and how you position your hive, all that plays into how good your beekeeping experience is going to be. Well, this will be up here. I'll get your question set.
Like a screen for your bottom board?
I have used screen bottom boards before. I've got some that are screened. I've got some that are solid. I can't say that I noticed the benefit of going to screen bottom boards.
For like lights and stuff?
There's a lot of conjecture about that, but I don't, in my experience, and I've only been doing this for 6 or 7 years, I've built some. I mean, I can build a bottom board out of about anything, right? But I built some that are screened. I use them. They're just fine. They're not a detriment to my operation at all, but I don't know that I gained anything.
Supposedly, the university studies on them show that you do get a casual mite drop out of it. There is a certain percentage that it does help with your mites, but it's not enough to really fight the battle all on its own. If you're combining that with multiple IPM, integrated pest management systems, you can see some results, but if you're just doing screen bottom boards all on their own, it's kind of a waste. Also, I kind of don't like screen bottom boards because they don't last that long. Essentially, you're putting, each one of those boxes has a lot of weight to it. So you've got your 2 brood boxes, they'll have some honey in those. You've got your mediums, your honey supers, whatever you want to call it. Your colony might put on 150, 200, 250 pounds worth of honey in a season, and you're putting that essentially on a window frame or a picture frame that's then just got screen there. If that gets even the slightest bit of moisture absorption, wood rot, anything going on, it just tears itself apart. So the solid bottom board for longevity's sake is just a much better financial purchase. Now, again, if you are concerned about the mites and you're doing multiple IPM things, yeah, you might take the route of then a screen bottom board.
One more downside that I experience on a screen bottom board is some of my mite treatments do not work with a screen bottom board. They actually produce an element in them that's heavier than air. And so if I have an open bottom, it's going to go out.
Yeah, the vapors basically just leak out of the hive through
Right,
it.
I got to put an insert in there, which I can do. I've cut out a bunch of inserts. I can lift back my hive and slide it in there and run, and do my mite treatment the next day. I can do that, but I'd rather not have to have that step.
It can chill brood in the springtime too. It slows down the growth of your hive when it's coming out of wintertime because of the extra ventilation for the screen bottom board. There's different things that it throws against, but in the middle of summertime, you're hitting all of a sudden June, July, and you've got 90, 100 degree days. That's extra ventilation that then makes it easier for the bees to cool down and stuff. So there's upsides to it also.
Any more questions about the colony equipment itself? Yes, sir.
The sides of the different boxes, are they usually used plywood or is it solid wood?
This here,
Yeah.
this is pine, usually solid, not ply.
Particle board absorbs too much
Yeah.
moisture and stuff. You want to use a solid wood.
Yeah, solid
Well, I
wood.
wondered about treated, but I wondered about the chemicals, but
No.
if you're not using it, it doesn't really matter.
No, it's solid board.
The top, is it ply?
So you can make tops. So this is the inner cover. Where my inner cover go? The inner cover is not ply. It's not solid. This is solid, and I didn't mention it yet. But there's my inner cover. This is like a corrugated. It's not corrugated. It's a couple levels above cardboard. Honestly, that's really what that is. It's not much to it. I'll mention this since I brought one with me. I don't use telescoping covers like this anymore. I can make this, right, which is this is a migratory cover. It has a little bit of a shim on it so I can have ventilation. All I need to do is cover that up and not give them the right amount of space here, and this will be fine. The downside is this is made heavy, but this could blow off. So most of my hives, I've got a brick or something up here to keep this on. There's no lip, right? Some of these you'll see with lips that come down over the front and back. I just didn't do that with this one.
A lot of commercial guys that run that sort of migratory cover that doesn't have any lips or anything on it, they'll go ahead and just drive a nail down through the right and left side of the box there, and it'll hold it on there.
Yep, can do. I do have that's an intentional opening there. It's an upper entrance. We'll talk more about why that's there. And I do have on this just a little bit of a rim. So I've got some space here. That gives me enough space. It's violating the space just a little bit, but it gives me room to maybe put a little sugar up here, a very thin layer, or a pollen patty or something up here if I have to do supplemental feeding. Much more than this, giving them this much more, and they're gonna attach this to this with wax and try to keep that lid solid on their own.
Is there any reason, like, why people paint them different colors or just for cosmetic?
White paint's cheap.
A light colored paint is good. If you get into the dark colors, they'll just suck up a lot of heat in the middle of summertime, make it really miserable on the bees.
Yeah.
So a light paint is all you need. If you can go get recycled paint and find something in a light pastel, that's super, super cheap to go get recycled paint. White paint is the cheapest that you can get anywhere, and it'll keep your bees the coolest in the summertime. Yes?
About the wax.
What?
Like,
Oh, wax dipped boxes?
Yeah,
Well, it's hard to find somebody that'll do that for you. And then you also pay for it quite a bit. And if you do have wax dipped boxes, a lot of people will still use an oil-based white paint on the outside there just to go ahead, because sun beating down on your wax boxes will heat them up enough that they'll sort of seep or tear the wax off the surface. Then the elements get in there and it grays your wood, and you just start having less life to the box. But wax dipped is really excellent for the overall longevity of your boxes.
do not paint the inside of your hive boxes. Right? So this is paint on the outside. There's no paint here. Hope not. Yeah, there's no paint there. There's no paint on the inside of any of these boxes. Bees don't want it there. They're gonna treat the inside of that box with the substances they produce to keep that a healthy environment for them. The purpose of painting the box is for the longevity of your equipment. I'm guilty of throwing 2 coats of paint on there, usually in sometimes the same day, because when I need a box, I'm in a rush to get it out there. My bees are gonna swarm if I don't give them room, right? So I bang my frames together, or brand new frames. I have boxes that I've had sitting around and had neglected to paint them. Throw a couple coats of paint on there and get it out there. Probably too soon. So, and part of staying ahead of your beekeeping operation is really a good idea, and I'm still learning that part.
That hive stand that's in the picture there, if you get it free with your kit, fine. You can use it. It'll be fun for you for the first year or two, and after that, you'll just throw it in the trash. If that doesn't come with your kit, for the love of God, please don't buy it. It's a piece of junk. Your bottom board is perfectly sturdy all on its own. Just set that on your cinder blocks and stuff. That's that hive stand that's pictured there. That is just another way that the beekeeping companies can use some scrap wood and sell you another product you don't need.
Is there a rule of thumb, a height off the ground, or is
It really boils down to you as the beekeeper for what you want to do. The higher you get your hive up off the ground, the better it is for keeping out possums, raccoons, things like that might come around and tick off your hives. You go too high, and then it becomes a problem with getting in your hive. So with migratory pellets, they're 4 inches off the ground for all of my hives.
okay?
Guys with cinder blocks, they get them up a little higher. There'll be other people that build wooden stands where they put several cinder blocks up. They'll go too high with their cinder blocks. They'll put pressure-treated lumber down the line there, making 2 rails, and they'll set multiple hives down it, and they'll have it off the ground about that far so that the raccoons and possums don't bother their hives. And that's great until you get a whole bunch of honey supers and you're having to get a step ladder out there to get the honey supers down off your hives.
Let's go to our next slide, because we're having a good conversation, but we're burning through some time. I mentioned there's research before you buy. I'm going to leave these catalogs here, guys. Feel free to look through them. Do not count on the prices in there. They're last year's catalogs, and anything in there has probably gone up in price just because of supply chain and supply and demand. Foundation, all right. I'll go through this quickly. I like plastic foundation, which is effectively, it's a piece of plastic that snaps into my frames. This is my frame. I guess we didn't talk about frames so much, did we? This is a frame. I buy mine unassembled. I put them together myself with a little air nailer and a little bit of wood glue. Frame without foundation, you can do, from here, once you're here, you can do multiple things. You can put just a starter strip here, and your bees, hopefully, will build you a nice wax foundation that's all wax. You can put, these frames have little holes in the sides. You can put wire through here as a guide. You can slip an entire very thin sheet of wax in here and wedge it. And again, it's all wax. And your bees will hopefully draw nice and evenly off of that. All that's doable. That's not all brand new beekeeper territory. The simplest thing to do, there are two, is either buy a wood frame that this plastic foundation snaps into. This has a little bit of wax that's been coated on it. Or you can get a one piece where your frame and your foundation, it's all one piece, like this plastic down the lower right. Yeah, lower right. It's all one piece. You buy them by the probably 10 count or better. Most of us are using 10 frame equipment, and you drop them in. And it's simple and it's done.
And they're coated with wax also.
Coated with wax, yeah.
If you buy the wooden frames and do the plastic inserts, you spend like 25-30% more buying it that way. Wooden frames with wax foundation, just wired wax or plain wax foundation, they're almost the exact same price as buying the one-piece plastic frames. Why go wood frames over one-piece plastic frames? It all boils down to preference. You're going to have some beekeepers that say, oh, I love the wooden frames. They're the best things in the world. You have others that say, I won't touch them, because you'll have them propolized together and you go to pop them out with your hive tool and you pull the top bar right off of it. Is there advantages for the bees or disadvantages? The plastic frames there, they have around the very outside perimeter of it, there is some space there that some hive beetles can get in and stay out of the bees' grasp, you might say. But the bees will keep them trapped there. The wood frames, detriment there. Wood can absorb chemicals, and wood can rot, and wood can pull apart where the plastic doesn't. So you just kind of pull the stuff, the good with the bad, and you decide what's right for you. I run all one-piece plastic frames. I don't want to mess with the time it takes to put those together. I don't want to mess with the frames popping apart on me. And when my comb gets old and I'm worried about too many chemicals getting in it, because over time you do sometimes want to cull your frames. When my comb starts getting nasty looking and stuff, I just take a putty knife and I scrape it off the frames and drop it back in the boxes, and the bees build back out on the plastic frames. With the wood ones and stuff, when you could scrape your plastic foundation down, but if you're worried about chemical buildup, it's in the wood. So you'd have to throw the wood frames away at that point to get new ones if you were honestly worried about culling the chemicals out of your hive type of situation.
Price-wise, again, prices have changed, but last time I buy by the 100 count, I'm at $2.50 or $3 a frame and foundation together, $2.50 or $3. I'd buy at that price, but I've seen them higher than that. And I don't know what one-piece frames are going together, but it's probably just a little under that, I'm guessing.
And quantity does matter really big on that, because if you're buying bulk amounts, or you go in with several people and get bulk amounts, you can get, if you bought a whole pallet of frames, you can get them down to $1.50 or $1.45 a piece. So
I'm not that big. All right, questions about foundation? You kind of glaze that real quick. You're probably going to wind up with either something like this or something that's a one piece to get started.
The industry's really pulling away from doing plastic foundation. Wax foundation anymore. It's more of they're selling it mostly now just for the hobbyist that wants to try it, or they're selling it for people that are doing cut comb.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
So much of the industry, it's either going to be wood frames with a plastic foundation stuck in there, or all plastic frame.
All right, this is my buddy. This is my smoker. There are many smokers like this, but this one's mine. All this is a bellows, and a container. There will be a little bit of a, inside here there's a screen so that my ashes can fall through it and I can get embers and cinders that remain here.
What's the point of a smoker?
I have my smoker with me all the time, and here's why. Good question. Bees act mostly on scent or pheromone, as we've talked about a couple different times. If I'm approaching a hive, I'm about to work it, I may or may not smoke it, depending on what I'm doing. But if I'm going to be in here for a while, or if I'm in there maybe and the conditions are not perfect, maybe I'm in there earlier or later than I should be, or I have a hive that it has a reputation, they just don't like me. When I smoke this hive, I smoke it at the entrance, give a couple puffs of smoke, give it a moment for that. The bees are going to start fanning right away. They're going to move that smoke around, and I'll probably smoke a little bit of them to the top, close that back down, give that smoke a bit to go around. What that does is it inhibits their ability to talk to each other. That's one of the things it does, right? It inhibits their communication.
That's probably the biggest part there.
Yeah.
You just want to silence them so that if all of a sudden Nancy over here gets hurt by you with the hive tool, she can't yell to Clarissa and Jenny over here and say, "We're under attack, go after that guy." It completely silences them from being able to tell each other that problems are happening.
There are there's nobody to prove this, but there are other theories that mimics a fire, and so the bees begin to eat some of their honey, and if they're busy doing that, they're not bothering me. I don't know if this is true or not. I was told take it with a grain of salt.
You never know what's a wives' tale and what's actually factual on some of these things.
If you find some old beekeeping photos, I would not be surprised if you see that the beekeeper smoking a cigar. May or may not have a veil on. He's going to blow some smoke in here. Something that they knew that we've now taken and now we've got a smoker. There's an art to lighting a smoker. We'll probably tonight's not tonight to talk about that, but if I do my job right, this guy's lit as long as I need it. And I keep mine lit if I'm going from a bee yard to another bee yard a few miles away. This is going in the back of my truck in a place where I don't have any fuel, and I'll strap it down or throw it into a metal container, and it'll stay lit as I'm going where I'm going, and it's ready for me when I get there. I'm typically burning wood pellets in mine.
You can burn anything that's not toxic, basically.
Yeah. There's a whole art to smokering, and let's talk about that when we're talking about bee management, not necessarily equipment, but this guy's with me all the time. I don't always use it, but when I need it, I'm going to go light it and use it. I'm not going to go waste a trip out to a bee yard. It took me half an hour to get there and not work by bees. If they're aggressive, I'm going to use the tools I have so that I can work that hive on there. All right, hive tool. These come in different flavors. I was given one actually that looks like a Swiss Army knife. Purpose of this guy is to be able to open your hive, right? These boxes right here in a hive, if I have to look down here, these are going to be propolized together. I'm going to need to get this guy in here, break the seal, probably in more than one location, stick this in my pocket or on the hive next to it, and then that allows me to get into box below. It also is good for manipulating the frames themselves. So these are all brand new frames, no wax on these guys. But if these frames have been in production with bees on them for a while, these are going to be stuck together likely, or stuck to the frame rests that they're on. I'm going to need to get them out. I'll use this to separate my frame away, and then if my gloves aren't too fat, I can just reach in and get it. If I'm working without gloves, I can pull that frame out. But if it's stuck or my fingers are too fat to get in there, I can use this in here to lift that to the point where I can grab it. Right? I can get hold of that now without my fingers going in here and maybe squishing some bees or me getting stung. A personal a preference of mine. I know that if I had one of these, I would never be able to find it. So every bee yard that I have 2 or 3 of those sitting out on top of my house. They're $5, $6, $7 each tops, and I don't want to waste my time when I'm all geared up. I can't see through my veil. I'm looking for something. That's a waste of time. So I have them. I know where they are. They stay there all through the winter. My hive will stay out there. Bee equipment. Your veils and jackets, your protective equipment. We'll look at these when we dismiss here, guys. Feel free to come up and look at these. You really should at least have a veil whenever you're working your bees. Likely you're going to probably want to have a jacket. You can get a full suit where you're covered from head to toe. You'll look like a spaceman.
The important part is that you feel comfortable working your bees. If you're nervous or scared, and etc., it's almost like you're emitting a scent that the bees know that you're scared.
They're girls. They know. I mean,
or if you're a little nervous working your bees, you're more apt to be shaking with your frame or drop it or anything like that. You just want to be comfortable here getting into beekeeping. The more experience you get with the bees, the more you're going to move to just wearing a veil out there working your bees.
Jason said something when he was mentoring my son 7 years ago. He had his jacket on, and I didn't have one. He had a number of bees around him, and he said, when you have your bee jacket on, you're pretty much bulletproof, and you kind of are, right? For as much as you're covered, unless you have a hole or something wrong with your veil, or you're not zipped up all the way. For the most part, you're bulletproof. I think maybe once a year I'll get a bee inside my veil, and that doesn't mean I get stung. That means I have a bee in my veil, and I have to measure my reaction to that, and not try not to freak out. Bee gloves. The guy's got bees on his hands for gloves. That's a friend. You probably want to start using gloves. Some schools of thought never let their beginners use gloves. They make them get used to them. For the most part, if you've done everything else right, and your hive is a normal hive, they don't have a problem, they're not angry, you can work your bees. You can work your bees without gloves, or maybe with a thinner glove like a nitro glove or something like that. That's kind of what I'm using these days.
Even in the height of honey extraction, when the bees are all ticked off and stuff, I just use the latex gloves myself.
Gloves, yeah. I got to do a series of splits a few years ago, and I was brave enough to do them. Took a day, and I just worked without gloves a day. I made myself do it. And you know what? I did take a sting. I got used to bees walking on my fingers. It was kind of cool. I had a good day. There was a nectar flow going on. The bees didn't really know I was there. And accomplishing that that helped my confidence. Hey, I can do this. I don't need to be bulletproof when I go out there. And if I take a sting on my fingers, I don't react poorly to bee stings. It's not the worst thing in the world for me. So, but I would recommend do what's comfortable. And if that means you're wearing gloves until you get comfortable doing otherwise.
This is the last slide.
Bee suit there. Again, you can get a head to toe. When you're really into a situation where there's no choice, the bees are going to be upset with you. Those things you can have your bee suit on. You can Velcro your sleeves. You can Velcro your cuffs of your pants. Wear boots. Tuck them in or don't tuck them in. That's not a situation of new beekeepers should get themselves into. That'll happen eventually. But buy the equipment that you need to be comfortable keeping bees. That's the best advice we can give. If you don't enjoy this experience, you're not going to want to do it. If you're not going to want to go out and inspect your hive, then it's going to get away from you, and you're just going to have a problem. So do what you need to do to enjoy the experience. Hopefully that's why we're doing this, is to have something that rewards you. Not something that's a fearful thing you have to go do every 10 to 14 days. I love working my bees. It's my most favorite thing in the world to do is not work my bees.
You can buy the full body suit here, but and if that's what you need your first year to be comfortable with your bees, to feel safe in your bee yard and have an enjoyable experience, go for it. But know that late July, early August time, when it is just 100% humidity outside and burning hot days, you're in a full body suit here. I don't care if that thing has, ventilated layers and stuff there. you're going to run the risk of having heat exhaustion or heat stroke out there wearing the full body suit in those types of conditions. So be very careful about that if you're wearing this. Bring a lot of water with you. Get in the shade if you need it and stuff like that. This may be a suit of armor, but it'll overheat you really bad.
I would recommend getting and spending a little bit more money and getting the ventilator.
Yeah, don't get a
Versus the cheaper
don't get a
canvas.
canvas suit.
Yeah.
Not get it.
You
You guys,
will pass out.
you guys
I don't
can-
care if it's August.
you guys come up and take a look and manipulate these all you want. Get used to them. It's dirty. I'm sorry. This is a year of beekeeping. Actually, that's probably about 3 months of beekeeping for me. They used to be white. That's just being outside and dust and dirt and sweat and honey and who knows what else.
I will say that those vented suits, whether the suit or the jacket, they're great if there's a breeze. If there's no breeze, though, that's just extra layers that heat you up.
And you're working over 90-some degrees when you're working a hive like this, for the most part. Maybe not bent over, but you're close to it. Right? It's that heat source is right there.
I own both types. They're the ventilated jacket, and then I've got a really, really cheap cotton one, but it's super thin, and it's just supposed to be so there's extra, it's like 3 sizes too big, you'd almost think, but just loose fabric in the air, stays off your skin. On the hot days that there is no breeze, I'll wear the cotton one because it's actually cooler to wear a single layer of fabric on those days than the ventilated suit. Now, if there's a good breeze, I look outside and I see the trees moving, I'll grab the ventilated suit because even though there's 3 layers to a vented suit, the breeze goes right through the type of material that the vented suit's made out of.
I've also got and we won't because we're out of time. I carry a toolbox with me that's usually in the back of my truck. I don't carry that out to the hives with me every time, but it's there in case I need something. I've got usually a spare hive tool. I've got another striker if my smoker goes out. I carry a couple buckets of smoker fuel with me, again, in case I need to relight my smoker. But let's call it a class for tonight, but I'll stay up here and Jason's around and we can talk about equipment. You can get your hand on the jackets, ask questions. Chapter 4 for next week, which, when is it? What's our next slide say, Jason? Oh, getting started.
So that'd be like packages, nukes, installing them.
Okay. Chapter 4. You did quiz the whole time. Look at us.
For your